Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this meeting of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Hong Kong. For the benefit of those who may not know me, I'm Alistair Carmichael. I co-chair the group with Baroness Natalie Bennett, and we have a very special meeting of the group today. I am absolutely delighted that we will hear from Ai Weiwei, a man who needs absolutely no introduction to an audience like this. His history as an activist and as a creative tour de force, I think, will be known to everyone, and who is going to show us a bit of his new film. We're going to see a 5-minute clip from it, Cockroach. We're also delighted and humbled as ever to have a representative with us from Stand With Hong Kong, who will give us a flavour of how, for them, the support they get from this country and why enterprises such as the film Cockroach are so important to them in the current context of the work they do. You should be aware, and if this causes you any problems, then this would be the point where you might want to leave, that we are recording this and that it will be available publicly afterwards. Obviously, our colleagues joining us from Stand With Hong Kong will be doing so anonymously. So, ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you, first of all, please, to give your attention to our colleague from Stand With Hong Kong to give their views on what we're about to see and the current situation in which they find themselves.
Thank you for having us, and thank you, Ai Weiwei, to come to our webinar, and thank you for following our movement so closely and lending us your voice. Fight for Freedom Stand With Hong Kong is an independent, grassroots, crowd-funded advocacy group consisting of individuals who have come together to fight for freedom and democracy for Hong Kong. SWHK members come from all walks of life and are united by a shared vision. Following the promulgation of the National Security Law in June 2020 by the Chinese Communist Party, we are now the only grassroots organization representing the voice of Hong Kongers operating in the UK, the US, and the EU. As an advocacy group, SWHK is focusing on strengthening the ties between many faceless Hong Kongese pro-democracy activists and British politicians, promoting a greater understanding of China's policy in Hong Kong, and its plan to completely disregard the 1984 Sino-British Joint Declarations, and campaigning for a complete rethink and re-strategizing UK-China policy. We believe China's gross treaty violation cannot be left unchallenged, and we believe the UK plays a unique role in helping Hong Kongers in our fight for freedom. With the new BNO visa and many young activists are now in exile, SWHK is also working with other organizations on both sides of the Atlantic to provide greater support for Hong Kongers who are fleeing from our home and helping Hong Kongers to continue our fight for freedom in a shifting landscape.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Can I maybe ask Ai Weiwei now if he might just say a few words about Cockroach before we see the clip? What motivated you to produce this, and what you maybe hope to achieve in having done so?
Thank you. It's very nice to have a chance to be with you. It's very, I think it shows the sincerity and the careness about the very important but sad issue about what happens in Hong Kong. And when Hong Kong struggles long before even British handed over to China. And, there's a huge percentage of Hong Kongers come from China. they escaped from China during the Cultural Revolution and the whole establishment of the new communist society. So they risk their life to be to be this island, and this island provides them possibilities to work and to prosper. And when this last year's struggle started, and we are actually, it's been 2019, we decided to make a film about it because we know, we say this is very unique. It's about young generation, very well educated professionals, very rationally united, and a huge demonstration. But very pure. It's not for any job or salary or whatever kind of demand, but rather for freedom, freedom of speech, democracy, and the rule of law. So, as we all can see, sadly, this has been lasting for quite months, many months, and has been crashed by the local authority, which is under communist clearly under communist instruction and order. So at the end, China passed this called national security law, and that is this is like the end of the Hong Kong, because we all know what the national security law is about. It's about a region which use that argument to put away anybody who has a different opinion or not even say different behavior, but just to have a different opinion. And so we made the film, and we have a team from my studio and also some on-site journalists work together, and we know it's going to be a film which record and documents this historical event. That's the basic background of the film. Hello?
Thank you for that. I can't think of any better motivation than the cause of freedom, especially in Hong Kong, for the embarking on a artistic enterprise such as this. So we are just going to share 5 minutes of the video. Can I gently say that if you're not speaking, it would be helpful if you were muted even. And I'm not going to embarrass any member of the House of Lords by drawing attention to your names at this stage. Are we able to share the video?
成個社會嘅呢個抗爭同埋自由嘅時候，自然會產生一個問題，就係話整個社會好似一個慢性自殺咯。但係因為我哋嘅示威受到好大嘅大規模同埋武力程度越嚟越高嘅鎮壓，咁自然係喺不對等嘅武力，喺不對等嘅權力底下，我哋嘅抗爭係越嚟越艱難。咁如果係繼續咁耐嘅，因為現代奴隸嘅社會，就係你嘅生存係要靠個政權嘅民。你如果要行使呢個權利，係要靠政權嘅施捨。如果你係要反抗嘅時候，係得到政權嘅鎮壓。如果你係講真話嘅時候，你得到謊言嘅暴辯。
So then the police come out from a door outside. People fell down and a lot of people got arrested. A lot of people there are just people protester and they are just like going around looking at the criminal story. Oh, the student had to run the class, so it was overflow there. So this time a lot of people trying to escape and got arrested.
Okay. I think that's the conclusion of the clip there. If someone and behind the scenes can maybe contradict me if that's not the case.
Could I just apologise, Alistair, for the poor quality of that video? There has been a problem with the connection of some sort beyond our control. I do apologise.
I'm sure we've all become painfully familiar with these sort of technical issues. Can I just ask, first of all, on a sort of housekeeping matter to Ai Weiwei, the film is on general release now, or would it be possible for us, actually, as an all-party group in the House of Commons, to dedicate a session to a screening of the film? Would that be possible, do you think?
It would be lovely. You know, I'm the both director and the producer. We make the film not for any kind of profit. It's just I think it's a responsibility and a part of our freedom of expression. And I think I really want UK to have more chance and more opportunities to show it to anybody who's interested in the matter.
Well, it strikes me that as an all-party parliamentary group for Hong Kong, we very much share an objective here. So if we could perhaps use our platform to get your film to people that we have contact with in Parliament, it would serve the purpose for both of us. So thank you for that. We'll stay in touch and see what we can do on that front. Max, are you coming in here?
Yes, thank you, Alistair. Just very quickly, Ai Weiwei's team have very kindly shared a screener version of the film, which was circulated previously. And following this meeting, we can recirculate that to anybody who hasn't yet had a chance to watch the film.
Excellent. Okay, well, we're now just at 1:20, so we have something in the region of 40 minutes. Can I invite people from the floor if they have any questions or comments to make? I confess I'm not as familiar with WebEx as I am with some other platforms, and I'm not entirely sure how I can find. I'm scrolling through the screens to see if anyone has the WebEx equivalent of a yellow hand up, and I'm not seeing anything yet. So I'll give you 30 seconds if you want to unmute yourself and just jump in with a question. And if not, I will then abuse the position of the chair to ask a question of my own. I see Clive Soley with his hand up and his mute off. So Clive, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, two questions really, which I struggle with. Britain obviously has influence as a former colonial power, but it's a delicate balance between losing all our influence with China and yet using it in a way that tries to make them see that the rule of law is actually, at the end of the day, beneficial for them in Hong Kong as well as for the people in Hong Kong. So we have an argument, but we also have to be very, very clear about the unacceptable behaviour of the Beijing regime. I just wonder if you've got any advice on that. Linked to that is this difficult problem of the judges, because again they're walking a very fine line now that the rule of law can be maintained in view of what's happening. And I just wonder if you have any advice or views on that. Thank you.
So, well, I guess back to Ai Weiwei on that, and I would be interested to hear what our colleagues from Stand With Hong Kong have to say, both on the question of the historic position in relation to Britain and Hong Kong, and also the current one in relation to judges. Ai Weiwei, do you have any thoughts to share with us on that first?
I couldn't hear any sound. I'm sorry about
All right, okay. If Clive, if you're happy, I'll paraphrase your question. The question was essentially that Britain has historic responsibilities in Hong Kong because we're a former colonial power.
I couldn't hear any sound. I don't know if you can hear me, but somehow something wrong with our audio.
We're hearing you. Perhaps if someone could put this into chat, I will be able
to someone shut my sound off, so I couldn't hear anything.
So, yeah, there's messages going into chat. Perhaps just for the smooth running of the meeting, someone point out.
可以，这样可以听了哟。是耳机的变成。
Are you hearing us now?
Yeah, I can hear from now. Okay.
All right. Okay. I'll just Clive Soley asked the question about Britain's current role in Hong Kong as a former colonial power, giving us obvious responsibilities, but also bearing in mind that we are a former colonial power. Where do we strike that balance? And also asking about the current situation of judges working in Hong Kong and the extent to which they may be compromised in a territory where the rule of law is somewhat patchily observed. And as I say, I'll come to the colleague from Stand with Hong Kong after this.
It's a question toward me.
Well, if you have any thoughts on these two areas, the judges, and what Britain's specific role can or should be in this discussion.
I think we always have to respect the history. When British handed over Hong Kong to China, there's a treaty, there's a very clear, contract with China. So I think internationally we have to act in the behaving, to really keep the promise, to not to just change since any time on the, this is not first. I don't think it's right behaving in terms of international affair. And this is certainly China showed its arrogant and it totally ignores the British's position in this case. I think it forced Britain to make to show its own principle and stand what Britain stands for. So I don't think I think British did the right thing to in many ways. I really think this is very important. Not just to say the history of Hong Kong. Without Britain's colonial past, Hong Kong is not Hong Kong. It's just a fishing village there. So the whole establishment both benefited by global economy and the China, mostly China, should not be simply ignored. And also that would set, what China's brutalness would set up a clear signal to send a clear signal to the global community if they're dealing with Hong Kong or they can dealing with Taiwan in the same matter, because they simply call it as their internal affair.
Yeah, I mean, I always think because of our colonial past, we have to be careful in our approach to Hong Kong, and we certainly have to approach the subject with some humility. But in the 21st century, this is about human rights. And the point about human rights is that they are universal or they mean nothing at all. So we do have an obligation, and it's not one that we can easily walk away from. Can I bring in our colleague from Stand With Hong Kong at this point? I think we would all be interested to hear in particular from somebody in Hong Kong about the view on the administration of courts and justice, the judges, and of course, as we've seen recently, some controversy surrounding the work of the British bar or bars in Hong Kong.
Coming back to the colonial historical tie questions, I think apart from as a historical and contractual, apart from that, more obligations from the UK part, but also as Alistair MP said, is the international community should really help each other to monitor any atrocity inflicted on any part of the world. It's not only about Hong Kong, it's also about the Uyghur population, about Tibetans, about anyone who endure a condition they should never be put under. And, the banality of evil is really the evil of a bystander. So, I think there's two other major reasons that UK kind of plays a very important role to protect Hong Kong's freedom. In terms of the current events of the judges, rule of law is we consider as from the British history because it lays a very robust foundation for the prosperity and stability and the protection of freedom for Hong Kongers. And without the rule of law, is Hong Kong would not be as an international city as it is today. So I really think after the introduction of the national security law, the rule of law has completely crumbled, and I would support any decision from any British or international judges to resign from their position because it would contradict to their professional conduct. That's all from our side.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam. Do I have the next question or comment from the audience? I'm not seeing anyone with their hand up at the moment. Is anybody going to?
Alice, if nobody else is coming in,
Please, yes, Clive.
Thank you. The point I'm trying to get over, I'm not concerned about apologising for colonialism in the past. It's, you know, we can spend our lives apologising for past history wherever you live on the planet. What I'm interested in is that we have influence, Britain has influence, and we make our views known. I've made my views known to the Chinese embassy here, and will go on doing so. At the end of the day, we can't force the change that needs to happen in Beijing. I've made the point on a number of occasions that, you know, if Beijing goes on as it is with the Uyghurs and even with its repression within, they'll end up having a revolution within China. You know, at the end of the day, you can keep the lid on for so long, but after a while it blows off. And I try and get through to them that it's in their interest to respect the rule of law. And I suppose what I'm asking is, you know, are we getting that balance right at the moment, putting pressure on the Chinese government, but at the same time recognizing that we can't just storm in and change everything in the way that we'd like to do?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll ask if anyone else wants to come in on this point. My own view, for what it's worth, Clive, is that, you know, this is something which will only ever really, or protests will only really be effective against a country the size of China if it's made on a multilateral basis. And, you know, this is a moment for the multilateral institutions, multinational institutions to step up to the plate.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And you know, there is a role for Britain, both because of our history in the area, and also as a, you know, as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, to be standing up and taking a lead here. That's why this is, you know, to my mind, it's not just about Hong Kong. It's also about the position in Xinjiang, in Tibet, in the future relationship with Taiwan. These are all relevant considerations.
And within China itself, I mean, there must be an underlying problem in China.
The best change is always the change that comes from inside. And I think back to the different campaigns that I was part of in my youth, like the anti-apartheid movement, for example, where it felt so much of the time like we were just howling into the wind, and then suddenly change came at a pace where you know, we wouldn't have believed it possible, but that change only happened because of the external pressure. So can I maybe come back to Ai Weiwei, since I feel we're in a privileged position to have you here. Can you just tell us a bit about your experiences in making a film like this? What were the challenges that you actually faced? And, you know, did you feel an impact both from access and from the willingness of people to speak after the advent of the national security law? Have you noticed that change?
Well, from beginning, because I have predict what China's behaving is going to be, and also I predict the outcome of Hong Kong, you know, is going to be pretty sad and also hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a struggle not between Hong Kong and China, but rather a struggle between so-called freedom and authoritarian state. Of course, people would say maybe that is not my problem, and but I do feel that's everybody's problem because Hong Kong represents the value which we all think we should protect and also to maintain the right moral stance for any society. Of course, China is very, growing very fast and present a lot of business opportunities for the West. That would make a lot of people hesitate to even to criticize China or to make a clear stand on issues like Hong Kong or Tibet or Uyghur. See what will happen if there's no voice for those places. Then the world will become clearly being dominated by this very arrogant, I would not even call them communist, but a really authoritarian type of control. So they become even more powerful, and you cannot even argue with them. You just cannot be in the position to argue with them because they know how the capital works or how the capitalism is working. And we can see China has so much influence already in the West, not just in Europe, but in the United States. And not only just economically, politically, but also even culturally, even in universities. So we see so many universities, not only in US, but even in Britain, are deeply associated with China. So then it comes to the larger game, who is going to win in next decades, so how much we can afford to lose our moral ground, or even philosophical, ethics to defend our value, not even to say struggle against China, but rather to defend your own value.
I mean, it's not the lesson from the Cold War years and struggles like apartheid and the rest of it, though, that if you see it in terms of victory, then there are never any winners, and ultimately what you have to do is find a point at which everybody can coexist.
Yeah, I think China represents a much bigger danger because as the Chinese foreign ministry put, I'm inside you and you inside us. So under that kind of situation, they are playing this capitalism game very well because they are authoritarian state and they don't have to go through the democratic procedure. There's no restraints for them. Rule of law or free press is nothing like that in China. So I think the West are facing a challenge they never had before.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we obviously feel very privileged to get your insight into this, but we all as parliamentarians actually hold a very privileged position as well, because we have access to ministers and decision makers, and we have a platform where we can influence, and that's the purpose of groups like ours. So let me just put it like this to you then. If you were in the position to have the privilege that we have as parliamentarians, what would you be doing with it right at the moment? What more would you like to see us doing to bring some attention to this and to build the case for change?
I think we always have to have this understanding of the future of the global situation, and because otherwise we are not prepared. Our understanding of the world is not right or complete. So of course, Britain as an old power or old empire in the modern days also have to come out a really contemporary understanding of its own identity. What is, I think that's would unite a nation or unite any group, political group to be right, to do the right thing, and to make sacrifice even by doing the right things. So I think this is very clear. We cannot just be to react to the simple little gain or lose, but rather to show we are determined to be on the right side of history.
Mm-hmm. Can I maybe put the same question then to Sam from Stand With Hong Kong? If you had the privilege of being in our position of being able to bring pressure to bear to get the contacts with ministers and the rest of it, what's the single most important thing that you would like to see us talking about and campaigning on here? What's the most important thing we can do to help and to support your efforts?
I think currently it would be in the top of my head. I think the Miniskiat has been one thing that we've been trying to lobby different governments band together and hold those human rights violators accountable for their actions, in hope that it will prevent other officials, following the same path, but also it gives all activists or people who are fighting for their freedom some hope that the situations will change. Of course, is a very limited things other countries can do to interfere the political system within China, but I don't think it is a sufficient reason for us not to do anything. I think it's important to keep the courage and the hope alive within China, not only for Hong Kong people, but it's also for Uyghurs, Tibetans who suffer longer than us. And hopefully one day, similar to the USSR, maybe one day, the magical day would happen.
Okay. I'll ask colleagues if they do want to come in any more on this, but I'm still not seeing anybody wanting to jump in, so I'll treat this as my own private conversation meantime, and come back to Ai Weiwei and ask, you have a lifetime history of dealing with the Communist Party in China. We don't hold you to predictions on anything these days, but where do you think the Chinese government, the CCP, will take this in the future? Is it just more of the same, or do you think we should be anticipating any new and different approaches from Beijing?
I think Beijing has a very clear strategy or plan, and it believes it will become the ultimate, the biggest power in the world, what dominates everything. They think this is all be the century for Chinese. So they acted more strategically, not just in dealing with Europe, but globally. And I think, but the key for them is to develop, which is gives them a legitimate reason to exist, even for this so-called Communist Party. And I think the only restrictions for them, or only difficulty for them, is when you first tell them you have a very different principle, you have very different beliefs in terms of human rights or or democracy. When those things are not being clearly insist or in terms of business or political conversation, then they would think we all the same. We all trying to find business opportunities and seeking profit, and we all the same. So when that assumption exists, there's almost no way to bargain with them, because they are really have a strong state power, and also they can do many things you never can do in Europe or in the US. So you always bargain with what chips you have in your hands. So I think the human value, humanity, human rights, freedom of speech, and those are so important for the West to really to hold and to insist. Otherwise, I don't think you can stop China. It's not possible.
Mm-hmm. And I guess not just to preach it, but to seem to practice it in our own country as well. Just how much of what we say and do, though, in Britain is heard by the Chinese government, and how much, in your experience, do you think they actually care when we criticise them?
I don't think they care at all. Honestly, they, of course, they do care about business, as long as they understand that you would have this business as usual. Then they don't care that much. They still can, look at Germany, which is a strong partner from EU with China, and German very clearly speak out about their own surviving and their own economic relations with China, which is very tight. For China, I think is the most probably reliable partner in the world, and which leads EU to really I forget 23 or 27 states. All agree to have to even build much stronger relations with China economically. So as long as those kind of relations being established, China is laughing. China is, that's all they need. And they know only, they know money talks. They know what make a powerful state even more powerful. And so this is sadly that's today's world's basic pattern of the so-called development.
Okay, Clive, I see you've unmuted, and I see Julie Smith has also got her hand up. So, Clive, then Julie.
Let someone else come in first, if there is someone else. I would only come back if I don't want to take someone else's place.
Do you want to ask your question then? Come back to Clive.
Okay.
Julie, you'd need to unmute.
Well, yes.
Are you wanting to ask a question? Oh, gone. Right.
I will come back in if there's no. I will come back in. I receive an awful lot of information from China. They send me the People's Daily and so on, and I've had it really going right back to the Cultural Revolution. One of the things I often say to the Chinese is that the history of the China is very much of changing leadership by force. It's not done in a democratic way. And what's happening now is deeply disturbing. And I think it reinforces what you said and what Sam said, in a sense, is that they really do see this as two systems. Their system, which they think is stable, whereas the West is unstable. They point to what's happened in the United States recently. But they're actually, historically, they're wrong. Democracies tend to be more stable in the long run, and authoritarian regimes like China tend to be unstable. But you're absolutely right again now, Weiwei, in saying that while they're making economic progress, it keeps the population quiet. The real difficulty then is how outsiders influence China and the decision makers in China at all levels. I suspect if the economy goes wrong there, then you will see trouble there again. It will not be a stable regime, but they really do present this as two systems to dominate the world, and they really are saying that their system is better. They don't dress it up at all. That's what I read in the information they send me. I strip away the propaganda, and you just see this very clear message: our system is the best. The Communist Party knows what's good for you, and we are the Communist Party. It's not even communist; it's socialist with Chinese characteristics, which is another way of saying an authoritarian regime, actually. This is what I think a lot of us in the West, not just in Parliament, struggle with, is how we address this. Trying to wreck the Chinese economy or just put pressure on them isn't going to work, even if it was a good idea. But somehow or other, we need to keep engaged with them to try and get through this bit about their own history. Their own history is one of instability because they haven't found a way of changing leaders without violence. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I see it.
So it is that balance between engagement and criticism, well, essentially. Where do you think that tipping point lies? I'll ask Ai Weiwei first and then maybe come to Sam, how you see the relationship.
Yes, Sam might have a view like that.
I would think China, they have keep talking to themselves is to have a system, how they call the confidence on their own system. But we can all understand China's system is not a clearly legitimate system because they never let anybody speak out or to not to even mention the voting rights. So basically, China is an emperor, or is it's nothing to do with communist or capitalist. It's a emperor which would do anything to gain the possibility, just like a capitalism, and to make the profit from it. So when you work with somebody like this, there's clearly you need to set up some kind of rule or principles. Otherwise, there's no gain, because without a rule and principles, what kind of game we're in. So I think they are very confident, only because they cannot even to raise the issue of legitimacy. They are not a legitimate power. Someone controls 1.4 billion people, but still no one ever, after 70, 80 years, not even see what the voting ticket is about, or they have not to even see they give out any opinions about anything.
Okay, Sam, can I bring you in at this point if you've got anything to add on this?
I think in the US recently there's been more and more often there's a separation between the Chinese government and the Chinese people. And I think all Western or other politicians, as rightly point out, that the change has to come from within. And then within China, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like a very isolated reality. They are building the internet firewall. There's disappearance of human rights lawyers and advocates. There's a very isolated reality that is another world to the West. But I think it's like you're trying to have a tight grip on sand or water, that eventually there will be some cracks. It maybe works for generations, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep trying to do so.
Yeah, I think that's very much the lesson that I draw from other similar struggles that I've been involved in. It always feels that you're just pushing water up a hill until then suddenly one day change comes, and it often comes at a quite bewildering pace, and it often brings with it unintended consequences. But believe me, it's always better to have to deal with the problems of success than it is with the problems of failure. Time is moving on. We're on to 7 minutes to 2. I will take a question from anyone else in the room who wants to ask one. Let's see, we have Lord Alton and Baroness Ludford with us. I don't know if either of you have any questions or insights to share. No, they're all staying uncharacteristically mute. They're obviously starstruck, I think. Can I maybe then just offer our guests a minute or two if they've got any last minute thoughts that they would want to share with us, or anything that, if there's any ground that you would have liked us to have covered that we've not. This is your moment to have your say. I'll go to Sam first.
Following up with, as China's the grips grow tighter, and the amount of people, not only from Hong Kong but from Xinjiang, Tibet, would be fleeing the situation if they could. So I guess apart from the Magnitsky Act, I would kindly ask the parliamentarians also consider to give all people a safer route to a safer environment where they can exercise their human right and have some dignity.
Yeah, I think it's very much one thing that we can be doing in this country, and it is certainly entirely consistent with our historic obligations, is to offer that safety and security for those who find they can't remain where they are. Final opportunity then to Ai Weiwei before we close the meeting.
I think what you have been saying, or Sam has been saying, is so important to have this integrity to tell the authoritarian regime, we are behaving differently because we have a very different understanding about human rights and freedom of speech and the rule of law. So those are very important. It's always need to be mentioned. Always need to be repeatedly mentioned, because otherwise we just have to say we're different. We have different world point of view, and we cannot be the same.
Yeah. So some things can't be negotiated on and compromised. I think that's the truth of the matter, isn't it? Well, I will offer Chris Whitehouse as the organizer and the host virtual for today, just to tell me at this point if there is anything else that I was supposed to have covered, or if there's anything else. Do I need to be giving notice of any future events or anything, Chris?
No housekeeping is necessary. Just to remind people that the video will be posted on the internet later. We'll circulate a link to it, and we will have some stills as well. Max has his hand up.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, just on the housekeeping, with the exception of Sam with Hong Kong for obvious reasons, just to build on the housekeeping, the fact that we want to share this video after this session on social media. Could I please ask other colleagues on the call to possibly turn their video on, just so that we can have a really nice still photo image for us to be able to promote this meeting on social media? Thank you.
You see, that's why they pay you the big bucks, Max.
Do you want us to tweet it round as well, a link of some sort?
Yes, that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
And for those who weren't aware, catching the opening remarks, today is the 180th anniversary of the founding of the modern city of Hong Kong. Whilst you've been on the call, videos have been broadcast from Lord Chris Patten, Ian Duncan Smith, Christine Jardine, and a dozen other people, including myself, with appropriate messages on. So do feel free to use the 180th anniversary of Hong Kong as another excuse to annoy the Chinese.
And can we just say a big thank you to Ai Weiwei and everyone else in Hong Kong?
Yeah, yeah.
We so admire what they're doing and what they're saying, and thank you very much for it. It's courageous.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you.
Now, I don't know, Max, if that's maybe as many pictures as we're going to get. So.
I think you're probably right, Alistair. I think we're very much appreciate everyone, and yeah, I think we're free to close the meeting now.
Right. Well, again, to our contributors, to Ai Weiwei and to Sam from Stamp Hong Kong, again, many thanks indeed. I hope that today is the start of a process rather than just an event in terms of engagement between you and us, because it does seem to me that we have such a broad community of interest here that it's very much in our interest for us all to be working together. So thank you for your attendance today. Thank you to everybody else who has attended, and we shall see you again soon on similar territory, no doubt. Thank you very much now. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.